Hi, Mr. Stu. There we go again. Hello, back to you. I'm excited to be writing in. You and I met at your speaking engagement in San Antonio, Texas. That was you know what? I am even using my Clarity Con cup. This was the engagement that I had in San Antonio. And I was so encouraged to hear you talk about children and how they deserve respect and support. Yes, they do. Thank you for your passion. Oh, thank you so much for saying that. Recently, I've noticed my child becoming more withdrawn and anxious. I've decided it's time to find a therapist who can really help. However, I'm feeling overwhelmed by the sheer number of options, and I'm unsure what qualities or credentials I should prioritize. Could you provide some guidance on what I should be looking for in a therapist to ensure they're the right fit for my child's needs? This is a great question, and one that doesn't often get considered. So many times it's just, you know what, this person says they're a therapist, I'm just going to go to them and just we'll see how it goes. And that's often not the best case scenario. If you can avoid that, if you can kind of cherry pick your therapist, there are some things that you can look for in a therapist to make sure that they're going to be a good fit. And if they're not a good fit for you, that doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad therapist. It just means that for your child and the issues that your child is facing, they're not the best fit. And that's completely okay. In mental health, there are so many different reasons why someone would prefer one therapist over another. And we don't take those things personally. If someone comes to me and says, Mr. Stu, I think I need a different therapist, I work with them to find a good fit for them. Some people prefer male therapists. Some people prefer female therapists. Some people prefer a therapist who has been through their particular issue. Some people prefer a therapist with a specific credential. There are all sorts of things to consider. But I have some questions that I feel are helpful in determining if a therapist is a good fit for your child and their needs. It's not necessarily credential based. Just so you know, there's a few different credentials that therapists or counselors can have. There's an LPCC, there's an LMFT, I'm what's called an LCSW. All of us kind of do a little bit of different training to do the same sorts of things, but there are different specialties. And then once a therapist has their credential, they also decide to specialize in different things. For instance, I specialize in children who are elementary age and younger, children who are on the autism spectrum, and children who have experienced what's called developmental trauma. So, here are some things to consider as you are trying to determine a good fit for you and your child when it comes to a therapist. The first question that you can ask your therapist in your first meeting with them, or even in your first phone call with them, is what is your experience in working with children with this particular issue? If you go to a therapist and you say, hey, what's your experience in working with a child who has anxiety, who has a severe level of anxiety, and they say something back to you like, oh, well, I haven't worked a whole lot with that, but I know about it. That might not be the best fit. Well, unless they're saying, you know what, I've got a great mentor who is monitoring me and helping me with all of the cases. It is something I am really interested in, and I have done a lot of work to gain a lot of knowledge about that specific issue, and it's something I'm really passionate about. And I have someone who's supervising me who is helping me make sure that I give the best treatment to my clients. Do you see how those two answers are different? Or if they just don't have an answer for you, if they just say something like, oh, well, I've worked with a lot of clients doing a lot of different things, they may not be the best fit for this particular issue, and that's fine. But the first question you can ask is, what's your experience with this issue, with this particular type of child? Another question that you can ask is, what modalities do you use? And that can be a big word, but modalities basically just means the techniques. What are the things that you use to do therapy? There's lots of different things that therapists use. There's CBT, which is the most well-known type of therapy. That's cognitive behavioral therapy. There's DBT, there's EMDR, there's all sorts of different acronyms. There's solution-focused therapy. There is play therapy. That's what I like to use. I use a method that's called child-centered play therapy, and that's what I use for all of my clients, whether they are 3 years old or whether they are 23 years old. It's called child-centered play therapy, and whether they want to play with toys or play with words in our conversation, that's the modality I use. So I can say I use child-centered play therapy, and then the follow-up question to that is that modality, is that technique evidence-based for this problem? So if it's anxiety and the therapist is using a modality called motivational interviewing, can they tell you that motivational interviewing is good for anxiety? I can tell you that child-centered play therapy is beneficial for clients with anxiety, and I can tell you how that works, and I can tell you why it's beneficial, and I can point you to some research that says it's evidence-based for that particular diagnosis. So, what's your experience? What are your modalities? And can you show that that modality is going to be beneficial for this particular issue? And then there's some logistical questions. How long should we plan to see you? That's a question that people don't often ask. Sometimes they just think, I'm signing my kid up for therapy and we're just going to go every week for the rest of their life. Or we're just going to go every week until they feel perfect. Or we're going to go every week until there's no more problems whatsoever. And that's not really the reality of how therapy works. Therapy is a time-limited professional relationship. And that means up front, I should be able to give you a heads up of about how long I think this issue is going to take. That number can change over time. It could be that we are 3 months into therapy and then another big thing happens. So we're going to need to extend the time we spend together, not because there's not progress being made, but because this thing that is out of our control came up. But up front, I should be able to tell you, here's about how long, based on what you've told me and based on my understanding of this diagnosis and my understanding of my process, here's about how long I think this is going to take. Now, if they're saying it's going to take years and years and years and years and years, that's something to consider. Is that something that you want to take place? Or if they say, give me 1 month, once a week, we're good after that. That also might be cutting it too short. And so really talk with them about how long to expect the therapeutic process to take, and kind of anything that might pop up that could either extend or shorten that amount of time. So what's your experience? What modalities do you use? And how long should we plan to see you? And then just logistically, how often or how do you expect this to go? How often do you expect me to be here? Is it once a week, once every 2 weeks? Is it twice a week? Is it any number of different options that come up? There's lots of different ways that therapists can hold therapy, where they can have their therapy sessions and they plan them. But we can say, hey, I would like to see you, I typically say I'd like to see you once a week for about the first 9 to 12 times, and then after that we can go once every 2 weeks, and after that we're probably going to be wrapping up. It's not going to take years and years and years and years of therapy most of the time. And if it is going to take years and years and years and years of therapy, here's my defense on why that's going to take place. And it's not going to be twice a week, every week for years and years and years and years and years. It's going to be maybe twice a week to start. Then we cut down to once a week. Then we cut down to once every 2 weeks. Then we might go once every 3 weeks. And at that point, we're going to kind of see how supports are needed. And then, you know what? I'm expecting that something's going to come up. And so we're probably going to go back to once a week starting at this time, because I see that this thing is about to happen. and I can defend that answer. And that's really what you're looking for. As you're having this discussion with your therapist, do they have logical answers to these questions? You might not know if there's a right or a wrong answer, but do the answers sound logical, and are they things that you are willing to sign off on? Are you willing to say, yes, we will come once a week for 12 sessions and we'll see how it goes from there? If you're willing to do that, then talk with that therapist about that plan. So those are some questions that you can ask. And then the one caveat that I always like to give people is be wary of therapists who suggest medication right up front. If that is the first thing that they are offering to you, and again, this is not in situations of danger. If there are thoughts of harming of a child, especially wanting to harm themselves, or a plan to harm other people, that's a dangerous situation where medication may be required. But if it's their first time meeting you and you've just listed some symptoms, and yeah, there's some discomfort, and yeah, there's some disruptive behaviors, but their first thing is just saying, yeah, I think that you need to go on some medication, they don't know you like that just yet. So be wary of I don't know if is that how you say that word? Wary, weary? I don't know how you say it. Just be aware that if a therapist is telling you right off the bat, first thing, that they think medication is going to be an answer to your problem, they might not be the best fit for you. Ask those questions, have that conversation, and then you decide along with your child. Let your child meet this person as well. If you decide, you know what, I'm willing to do that, now I'm going to let my kid meet them, and let's see if my kid feels like this will be a good fit. Then you can decide all together. And if it's not a good fit, that's okay. You can talk to that therapist and say, I don't think this is a good fit. Do you have someone that you think could meet these requirements? And that therapist should work with you to find a better fit for you and your child, and the plan that maybe you have in mind and how it can be negotiated a little bit better. That's really my best recommendations for how you can find a good therapist for your child and whatever it is that you might be facing along with them. Let's see, there's a comment in the chat. Cassie says, if there's an intellectual or developmental delay, families typically experience difficulties accessing mental health care. That's very true. A therapist trained in the skills system might be something to look for. Cassie, I am unaware of this skills system. Can you tell me, maybe you can post in the chat a little bit about the skills system? I'd love to know even more about that, especially because that is a population that I work with quite a bit. A therapist trained in the skills system, maybe I know it by a different name, but great information there. So if you have a child who is also experiencing some intellectual or developmental disabilities or delays, and you are having trouble getting access into that care, then you can look for a therapist trained in the skills system. And I will look more into it if it doesn't pop in the chat more about that. And I'll have more information about the skills system the next time that we are together as well. There's some information from Cassie. Thank you, Cassie. Thank you, Cassie. Cassie says that she will email me some information. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing that. The skills system, that does sound very interesting, especially knowing that a lot of times children who are experiencing intellectual or developmental delay or disability do have difficulties, and I'm not sure what skills it's discussing, but there's a type of therapy that's called ABA. It's a behavioral therapy that helps children mainly with autism, develop different skills. And so I'm wondering if maybe there's a connection there. Thank you so much for that. And hopefully this helps. Hopefully you now are empowered with some knowledge about how you can find a good therapist for you and your child.